not only are you getting reps in for that writing muscle, you're getting reps in for that mixing muscle.
You're listening to the Human Music Podcast. Woo!
Yo, I want to pull us back around to scheduling. Actually, we had a really good talk a few episodes back. Actually, I think it was on episode 1 about scheduling, and somebody gave us a sweet comment that I'm going to go find right now.
Shout outs to that guy.
Shout out. Rave horn. No.
Yeah, this guy, shout outs to Space Cadet Artist. He thought our video was really insightful, so rock and roll there. But he's been trying to perfect, or they're trying to perfect their workflow and schedule. And it's they asked that they said they're currently working out whether it's better to just make and post something new every day, or try to write tracks all day and finish and mix them on another day, etc. You know, there's so many ways to schedule. Like, what do we feel is a better method, or maybe when and why?
That's a great question. My first instinct on that is, well, it depends on how much time you're spending on it, and also is he releasing something every day, like a song or something?
That's that I asked as well. My general take on it is, like, if you're posting music to public places, like, definitely always, no matter what, for sure, mix that shit. With the maybe exception of, like, that over-the-shoulder story look with your computer screen in the background. Like, hey, guys, I'm in the studio currently, and it sounds like this through my phone speaker. Like, whatever. Okay, that's one thing. It doesn't have to be mixed with that. They can't hear it anyways. But even if you're going to SoundCloud, for God's sake, if you're going to Apple Music and Spotify and other real deal outlets, mix your shit. For sure, and also sleep on it, and also sleep on it again, and then get somebody else's ears on it, because the internet is forever.
Totally.
So don't put crappy crap out.
And, like, especially, okay, so my answer to Space Cadet's question, thank you, Space Cadet, is definitely don't mix it the same day you write it. Because that time that you're spending mixing and mastering and thinking about the engineering side is the time that you could have spent while that song is still fresh for you, while you're still in the writing phase, that you could have come up with all of the cool little detail bits that really bring a song together. You know, like, you have your main bass line and you're like, how do I transition this into the breakdown? And you spend, 15 minutes, 30 minutes, like, resampling a bunch of weird effects. And then there's this one that, like, tails off, like, exponentially, and then, like, turns into bits as soon as, like, you go into the breakdown. And then you're like, holy fuck, I did not mean to do that, but that shit works really good. That's the kind of thing that, like, if you come back to the track later, you're probably not going to think to sit down and make those kinds of things. And you're also just already coming back to it with, like, okay, how do I finish this thing? And you're not, like, in that joyous, like, let's try a bunch of random shit. Like, you're more like, this transition needs to be better. I'm going to add a shitty riser here. All right, I'm done. You don't want to be like that when you're writing music. You want to have all the cool bits to use.
Yeah, I think a good piece of practical advice, and thanks for the question. I think, and this is just totally me taking a shot in the dark, but judging by the question that they're asking, I think I can get an idea of relatively kind of where they are. And this is the advice I'm going to say. For the next 5-10 tracks, go all in on just writing, and clearly reflect after each section where your sticking points were, or anything you're finding that you're doing very often. And now, for me personally, I don't know about you guys, but, like, I have a bunch of tools and stuff saved, and I mix as I'm writing, and I can get, like, a playable master of a song in 2-3 hours, because I think the benefit of approaching it that way is you get a sense immediately of how much space this is taking in the mix and how is it going to sound in the final product right away instead of sort of guessing. So this is what I'm going to say. 5-10 next tracks, just focus on the process. Clearly reflect on that, get a good idea of where your sticking points are, and work on those on the following tracks. And also, you're going to have 5 to 10 tracks later to look through and save all of these racks and stuff that you created for each of the tracks. So if you're finding, oh, I can process, my basses in this way, or scratch that. Basses need to be loud, front and center, saturated, right? There's a few traits that are consistent from song to song. You're going to make that tool in that session. And when you come back to it, after you write those songs, set aside a day or two to dig through those projects, and any racks that you might have made or any processing, group it together. And I know you can do this in FL with Patcher. I don't know if they're in Ableton. I think Reason has racks as well. Correct me if I'm wrong, Luke.
Yeah, we call them combinators. Woo!
That's it, combinators. And so in Ableton, I know you can specifically map the macros how you want them. And I would say, say you made a drop introducer rack, and all it serves is you copy paste the drop idea into the build, and now you can fade it in. Well, maybe think about if you can give that 1 or 2 more options, or maybe you can, fine tune just a few little details so that every time you load it in, you're not having to focus on these little things, and everything's tuned to a way you like it. And you're going to build your sound up that way and your workflow. So you're going to start generating ideas quicker that are of more quality. And I think, honestly, after those 10 songs, you're probably going to be over most of them. And the main takeaway I really want you to take away from here is really bringing that awareness to where your sticking points are and which parts of the process are taking the longest for the minimal return. And then you're going to want to think of a way to incorporate that into your template or your library.
Amen, man. That's some really good points there. Having a focus on volume of ideas and process before you have a focus on finishing every last detail of something, especially if you're, in a place where, you're not getting finished mixes anyways. You're getting better drafts each time, but you're not actually finishing the mix in the same night to a professional standard. And getting the pile, and then you can look at the pile and be like, all right, which of these songs am I already over out of these 10 tracks that I just made? Mm-hmm. Which of these songs can I not get out of my head because I think they're so dope? And then you get to actually allocate your time better in that way. Totally.
One thing I'm really big on too, that I want to add is focusing in on one thing. Because I find when people really separate these processes down and it starts taking them a week or two before they move on to the next project, well, then think about it. You're mixing one track every 2 weeks versus if you write 5 to 10 and then you go back and you mix them. Not only are you getting reps in for that writing muscle, you're getting reps in for that mixing muscle. And I feel the biggest benefit of this, and this is something a lot of startups preach too, just as far as scalability and growing as quick as possible. They talk about getting that MVP out, the minimum viable product, get it out into the market, get the feedback, implement, get another one out into the market, feedback, implement. And that's why I find that process of condensing down tasks. I think they're a duo, you said, Luke?
I'm not sure. I said they because I said he, and then I realized I literally have no idea what gender Space Cadet feels like going, and I'm working on my wokeness in 2020.
Totally. So what was I talking about? I was going to say, condensing down tasks, tasks. When you just focus on writing, when you just focus on mixing, you're getting feedback. You're learning and re-implementing that back to back. And to me, that's the equivalent of you want to increase your pull-ups? Well, you got to start getting those reps in, right? It's all comes down to the repetition, and the more you can squeeze that in a shorter time frame, your progress will shoot up exponentially. And I found it works outside of producing too, like with cooking and stuff. I'll often cook the same dish a few days in a row, and it gets exponentially better by day 5, 6, 7. So yeah.
And batching tasks that are there's a phenomenon called attention residue when you're switching tasks. And, it's like, you look at your phone for a second and then you're like, wait, what was I just talking about with this person? It goes from that. But also, I think it really applies here, too, when you're thinking about like, well, okay, I could just I've got this week to work on music. I could focus on writing and really hone in on my writing. And then next week, I could really focus on mixing and really hone in on mixing. And I know for me, working on this podcast recently, learning Premiere in order to cut up all our video clips and everything. It's if I go all right, well, I'll make one video today, and then I'll go and I'll make one thumbnail for YouTube for that clip the next day, and then I'll go back to making one video. It takes forever. But if I get my rhythm up and I'm like, okay, I'm in Premiere for the foreseeable future until I cut this episode into clips, and I'll just go for hours and hours. And then the next day I'm going to go for hours and hours and make one thumbnail video for every single clip that I'm putting on YouTube, or one thumbnail picture, and be like, okay, I have all the titles of the videos. Let me just make a thumbnail. Let me get a process going. And each time I do it, it gets a little faster. And I learn a lot of things in that one block of time doing that one type of task over and over. And then I have a whole body of work finished, as opposed to a little part of the whole body of work that I'm pushing off until next week on the whole rest of the pile.
Yeah,
Totally.
I love this concept. You guys have actually inspired me to rethink my workflow on finishing some stuff here recently, because it's really, I do feel that stiction jumping back and forth between creation and engineering. And the days where I have been like, okay, I got to mix down these 3 songs, and you can just rotate between them and work on them. And then when you get stuck or burnt out on one, you're like, all right, next one. But you're ingraining the habits of the things that you're learning by, you're like, oh, this worked really well on this song. Maybe that technique could help with this thing on this other one, right? And so you're really firing those new learned skills over and over, so then you can kind of habitualize them for when it works. And yeah, it's just a lot more efficient. So I'm gonna start thinking about that a little bit more, and I'm organizing my weeks of, I want to finish writing these 4 songs, and then the next week will be like, okay, I want to finish mixing these 4 songs, or however it gets divided. But I like that a lot.
Yeah, batching tasks is such a powerful move, because it takes repetition to really learn anything at all.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And if you're not repeating what you just learned, you're not really gonna ingrain it in any sort of encultured way into your process. It's not going to be a habit yet. It's going to be this thing you watched on YouTube once, tried once, and then forgot about in a sea of other YouTube videos. But if you just okay, well, I learned this new process, let me do that a lot. Is this a bass? We keep coming back to bass sound design. If you're learning about bass sound design, design a shit ton of bass sounds. Do a bunch of mud pies, really experiment with which plugins in which order is getting you what result, so you start to get a lot of information back, and then you can attack, okay, now I've got all these cool mud pies, and I got way better at the end. So these last 5 mud pies, let me start making instruments out of them and picking the best moments. And now I've got a bunch of instruments. You know what? I guess it's time to write a bunch of bass songs.
Human Music Podcast. I like it.